The absence of a message can sometimes carry more weight than any carefully crafted speech, and this year, that silence has placed King Charles III under an intense and unforgiving spotlight. Easter, a moment deeply rooted in reflection, renewal, and faith, has passed without a word from the very figure entrusted as defender of that faith. For many, it is not simply about tradition, it is about presence, reassurance, and continuity in uncertain times. And when that presence is missing, questions begin to form, not quietly, but with growing urgency. This is not merely about whether a message is customary or obligatory. It is about expectation. A monarch's role, particularly in moments of cultural or spiritual importance, is to offer stability, to remind people that even as the world shifts, some pillars remain unmoved. Yet what unfolds instead is a sense of detachment, as though duty has been reduced to a checklist, selectively acknowledged rather than fully embraced. And in that gap between expectation and reality, frustration finds its voice. The monarchy has always thrived not on power, but on symbolism. Its strength lies in continuity, in the quiet assurance that someone stands as a constant when everything else feels uncertain. In times where fear, division, and confusion dominate public sentiment, that symbolic role becomes even more critical. People do not look to the crown for policy, they look to it for grounding. Yet what happens when that grounding begins to feel absent? When actions appear minimal, almost procedural, rather than purposeful? The concern voiced by many is not rooted in hostility, but in disappointment, a belief that the role is being underplayed at a time when it should be most visible. And as weeks pass without meaningful engagement, the perception grows that the connection between the monarchy and its people is no longer as firm as it once was. This is where the tension lies, not in a single decision, but in what that decision represents. A gradual shift, perhaps unintended, yet deeply felt. At the heart of the criticism is a deeper issue: identity. The title, Defender of the Faith, is not symbolic decoration. It carries historical and cultural weight tied directly to Church of England. For many, it represents a commitment not just to tradition, but to values they feel are increasingly under pressure. In a climate where people already sense those values fading from public life, the absence of acknowledgement during a moment like Easter feels amplified. It becomes more than silence, it becomes a perceived withdrawal. And when contrasted with visible engagement in other contexts, that perception sharpens into something more uncomfortable: imbalance. This is not a rejection of inclusivity. Most understand the importance of respecting multiple faiths across a diverse society, but they also expect clarity of role. When that clarity blurs, it creates unease, as though the very foundation of the institution is shifting in ways not openly addressed. Trust in public figures rarely erodes overnight. It fades through patterns, small decisions that, when viewed together, begin to tell a larger story. Each moment of perceived absence, each instance where expectations are unmet, adds another layer to that narrative. For critics, this is no longer about one Easter message. It is about a sequence of choices that seem to signal a reluctance to fully embrace a defining responsibility. Whether that perception is entirely fair or not becomes almost secondary, because perception itself shapes reality in the public sphere. And as that narrative grows, so too does the sense that something fundamental is at risk, not just the reputation of a monarch, but the stability of the institution he represents. A monarchy cannot function on uncertainty. It requires confidence, clarity, and above all, consistency. What remains now is a question that cannot be ignored. When expectation and action drift too far apart, what follows? Calls for change are no longer whispered. They are spoken openly, driven by a belief that leadership must align with the responsibilities it carries. This moment, whether temporary or defining, places King Charles III at a crossroads, not simply as a figurehead, but as a symbol of continuity in a time that feels anything but stable. The path forward will require more than silence, more than minimal obligation. It will require a visible reaffirmation of purpose, because in the end, institutions endure not through tradition alone, but through the confidence of the people who believe in them. And once that confidence begins to falter, restoring it becomes far more difficult than maintaining it in the first place.